Morning. Ladies and gentlemen and valued legislators, welcome to our first legislative forum of 2024, where we gather to engage in thoughtful discourse and learn more about our representatives are working on at the Capitol. I'm Mindy McAdams, the Executive Director of the Fairfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and it is my honor to stand before you as your moderator for today's event. This forum provides a vital opportunity for us to delve into the accomplishments, challenges, and visions of those who currently represent our community. As citizens, it is our responsibility to stay informed about what our elected officials are working on. Throughout these forums, we aim to foster an environment of respect, transparency, and meaningful dialogue. We encourage both our legislators and their constituents to engage in open exchanges, to pose pertinent questions, and to listen attentively to the responses. Our legislators have demonstrated their dedication to public service by assuming the responsibilities of their elected offices. I urge everyone present this morning to approach this forum with a commitment to civic engagement and democratic participation. Let us seize this opportunity to engage in a constructive dialogue that not only informs our understanding, but also strengthens the bond between elected officials and the communities that they serve. These forums would not be possible, and you would not have those wonderful donut holes, without our great sponsors. Sponsors for the events this season are Morrissey Law Offices, Fairfield Community School District, Fairfield Arts and Convention Center, Sierra Club, and JFAN. Special thanks to our friend Jason from Fairfield Media Center for recording and live streaming today's events. Our February topics are workforce, renewable energy, education, and healthcare. Without further ado, let me introduce our legislators. Senator Adrian Dickey serves as Chair of Workforce, Vice President of Transportation and Economic Appropriations, and is on the Ways and Means Committee. Representative Helena Hayes is on the Environmental Protection and Natural Resources Standing Committees, as well as International Relations Committee. Representative Jeff Shipley is the Vice Chair of the Government Oversight and serves on Labor and Workforce and Public Safety Committees. We thank you for being here. They will give you an update on what they're working on, and then we will take questions and answers. Please remember, we are all adults, and to have a really great conversation means you're a good listener as well. So, ladies first, Miss Helena.
Oh, thank you. She has a way of surprising you. I didn't know that. Well, I have to say I'm so glad to see all the red shirts here, all the AEAs, teachers, superintendents, probably some para-educators, things like that. If it weren't for you, we would have a very small crowd. So thank you for showing up. I know what you're going to be here to talk about. And so it's a good thing education's on the agenda. My name is Helena Hayes. I'm from New Sharon. I'm a homeschool mom of 25 years, so I get education. I've got to have the blessing to educate my own children, and it has been, thank you. Actually, it was sort of my second opportunity, I feel like, to learn what I wasn't paying attention to in school, and I've absolutely loved it. So my youngest is a senior. He's taken mostly college classes in Indian Hills, criminal justice, and looking forward to possible military service. I've got a son who's 23 and then a daughter who's married at 26 and 2 grandchildren there. So I'm excited to be here. This is my second session, so I'm a first-year representative, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say today. We have so much to bring to you, so it's a good thing this is a longer forum. It's an hour and a half, so thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Jeff Shipley, serving Fairfield, Mount Pleasant, and Van Buren County. One, I just want to say there's a lot going on in the world, nationally, internationally, that a lot to be very, I guess, interested in. I don't want to say concerned about necessarily, but a lot happening that will chart the course of civilization for the next century. The more we see everything else going on in the world kind of melting down, the more I just say thank God for Iowa, that we have the state of Iowa and the communities we do that can hopefully insulate us from some of the challenges we're seeing other places. One assignment that I've been putting a lot of work in that our host didn't mention, I'm also on the State Children's Behavioral Health Board, dealing with a lot of these emotional, social, mental health, behavioral problems that we're seeing in children and adolescents. I did say this is my biggest priority moving forward. It's frankly beyond sad in a lot of cases, the situations we're dealing with. Basically, I do think mental health crisis is the best way to explain what we see going on, and a lot of that does fall squarely on the public schools, as the public schools are going to become, whether we like it or not, just the reality being that kind of frontline access point for mental health, behavioral health services. So that's kind of the reality we're dealing with. There's one legislation I'm particularly pleased with and really happy with the way the discussions are going. There's a program called the Therapeutic Classroom Grant. This came out right before COVID. A couple of the neighboring districts have taken advantage of it. Basically, it's money that the Department of Education will reimburse districts when they make investments to improve social, emotional, and behavioral health. So we're just massively expanding that, trying to bring as many tools into the toolbox as possible, as many strategies on the table for supporting children and their emotional, behavioral health needs. And so one key aspect of this is nutrition. Both the micronutrient and macronutrients, really connecting the dots on the food we're eating, especially on a daily basis, will affect the way we feel and behave. But even goes further and talks about things like natural versus artificial lighting, which some people think could influence behavior disorders in children. So it's a pretty broad approach, and again, just trying to put more guidance and framework and just letting school districts do whatever they feel they need to do and ensure that there's funding there to reimburse for those investments. So that's Therapeutic Classroom Grant. On the other side of the children behavioral health issue, on the more acute situations where children need inpatient care, we had a situation with a local student just this past weekend, and just how stressful it is for parents to find a bed available, which means a staffed bed available, and the distance involved in getting these facilities. The quality or efficacy of the care that they receive when they get there is a different conversation, but ensuring that for the most acute needs, when you have a student who's really not behaving appropriately, that they have that acute inpatient psychiatric medical attention. So this is something the department's been working on for a number of years, and there's another bill moving forward in the Human Resources Committee, actually led by Hans Wills over in Ottumwa. It's more of a technical fix, but again, just trying to find these bottlenecks that are preventing people from providing these care, find the bottlenecks that prevent people from ascertaining assets, and trying to smooth that out as best as possible. So obviously this is a long-going discussion. Obviously when we're talking about acute psychiatric inpatient care, we're pretty far down. We really need to look at how to prevent these things more. An ounce of prevention is going to be worth a pound of cure. And honestly, just the limitations of psychiatric interventions. I think the new generation of psychiatric health care will likely be physicians who can take kids off of these drugs versus prescribing new ones on top of their current diagnoses. So it's a little bit controversial, not saying I have all the solutions, but I think these are the directions that I'm really hoping the state of Iowa can look for, because we've been hearing, this is something I've heard about since 2019, my first days in office, about just the behaviors and the problems and how difficult that is on educators. So that's enough for an introduction for me, and I guess I'll say, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for our hosts. Political power is definitely exercised by those who can show up in the morning and be here. So thank you all. Looking forward to a great conversation today.
Good morning. My name's Good morning. My name's Adrian Dickey, State Senator from Senate District 44. I'm blessed to be serving. This will be my fourth year now. I won't give a whole lot of introduction because I do have to leave about 9:15 today. Unfortunately, today is our county convention day, and that's part of the process that either party goes through to lay out the planks of their platform for the next year and to hear from their candidates that are on the ballot this year, which I am on the ballot this fall. Part of Senate District 44 has 5 counties. Well, unfortunately, with those 5 counties, 4 of the 5 conventions start all before 1 o'clock this afternoon. So I got to be in Oskaloosa by 9:15 to get me to Keosauqua by 10:40, I think, and then Mount Pleasant, and then back to Fairfield by 1. So if there's any questions you have specifically for me, please try to ask them before 8:15 before I have to take off. So thank you.
you have a question, come over here. The sponsors, you are first. Mr. John Morrissey.
Good morning. All of us that are here today very much appreciate you trying to schedule around not just us, but everything else you got going on. Whichever side of the political aisle we come from, we know that it's important that you do that, starting with the grassroots. So my question is not an education question, but it sort of is. It involves workforce and one of our more powerless parts of the labor market. Over COVID, in our Senate and House district and in our judicial district, an institution that's been out there for a couple generations, almost 50 years, pretty much was watched and then allowed to die. I'm not saying that any of you caused it to die. I think the pandemic caused lots of things to have difficulty. But this community for about 45 years had a sheltered workshop, and so did about every other county seat in our judicial district and in this overall southern Iowa area. Our local institution, and I've had lunch with Representative Shipley and talked about this a little bit a while back. And it's a difficult situation, but we have several dozen families in our community that had workers there for 2 generations. The Tenco organization has pretty much folded. They merged with First Resources. The facility itself never reopened after the COVID situation. Des Moines Register reported that Governor Reynolds, apparently her attitude about was that we were probably just going to let it ride. 39 people at the Voc Rehab Department were let go. I know enough about the way that work from having been on boards for the local agency and for the regional agency and their foundation that Voc Rehab grants funded a lot of the workers, also the job coaches, also parts of the staff at the facility locally, but also throughout the region. I don't know what the sentiment is of the Senate or the House right now as far as any chances of restoring those kinds of facilities. We still have First Resources in our county. We still have First Resources around the general geographical area. My understanding is, except for a makeshift crew over at Ottumwa that does can recycling and a group up behind the office building in Sigourney, that there isn't much more going on as far as sheltered workshop activity. So the question is to each of you, do you have something being discussed at all, either with the House or the Senate, about this area of workforce? I can't see that much else is going on as far as what we read in the news or listen to, so anything you can say about that would help, okay?
Sure. So I'm the chairman of the Workforce Committee in the Senate. I guess I don't completely understand your question. Was it an appropriation that was made in the past that got removed after COVID? And that's why, and I think you're talking about individuals with disabilities and placing them in the workforce?
Yes, Senator.
And please keep it quick, because we're...
I'll do that. The situation is that I view the 39 employees of the Voc Rehab Department that were let go, this happened in the last 18 months after COVID, as sort of a signal that you may not expect anything like this in your communities again. I just know there's a lot of people in this community and some of the other communities.
Okay, well, is it an appropriation, though, that is why they left go? I mean, I guess I don't understand I'll answer this way. I'm not aware of an appropriation or some state funding that put that program in place. That was before I was elected. But
Arose out of local communities setting up their own workshops with the nonprofits. But the Voc Rehab Department, year after year, I'm aware in this community for probably 45 years, was the determinant on whether a lot of the individuals that did sheltered workshop jobs had anything to go to. If there weren't Voc Rehab grants, there weren't people that were able to go to those jobs. And my understanding is 39 of the employees in that department, which would have basically been about half that department's gone. That was a decision that was probably made executive, but I believe the executive and the legislature have had their heads together on a lot of this.
okay, I don't know of an issue where there was funding from the workforce side in the state that was funding these programs. I mean, I'm fully supportive of the individuals with disabilities. I think it's a huge untapped market for a workforce. And I don't say market, that sounds a little crude, but they're definitely overlooked and were many areas where they could be put in place. I actually last year worked with the head of the disabilities in Iowa. It's disabilities, it's another branch within IWD. But I mean, I brought up the hypocrisy, in my opinion, that some of these individuals could be working in the Capitol. You know, I mean, we got clerks, we got pages, and there's many individuals that could be working in the Capitol doing those roles, and I would like to see that take place. So as far as a specific funding, I'm not aware of one that was removed from the state. You mentioned local control, and I think that's probably more where it is a local issue at the county levels or maybe a regional, but it's certainly open to looking at that, because I agree. I think those individuals are wonderful, and that was a great opportunity for them to join our workforce.
Yeah, I guess I'll just echo Senator Dickey's commitment to the concept. And again, thank you for bringing this forward. I think this is a great example of, even though we're in the building quite a bit, this is still a part-time job. And unless you directly inform us what's going on, sometimes it's difficult for us to keep up with all these issues. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. I had a great visit with Tenco back in 2018. Since then, I've actually been in touch with Cheryl Plank. She's moved on to a different organization, but is still very much involved in the nonprofit sector. Actually, Southeast Iowa Days, when they were up here, was that last week or the week before, a former Ottumwa city councilman had a conversation with him about the existing First Resources program. So I would just say keep being persistent and keep reaching out to us, and I think it's something we'd love to see. And but yeah, so your persistent advocacy will pay off, would be my expectation.
And I just want to add, that's on, is it? Oh, took a little bit. That the neat thing about us three from your district is that you heard the variety of committees. So when we're elected, we get assigned certain committees, and there's about 22 different committees in the House and also that in the Senate. And it tends to be that your focus is on those bills that are coming up through there, especially which has happened this part of the session. We're 6 weeks into the session. And being on natural resources and environmental science, it seems like all we ever talk about is raccoons. So I may need a little bit of update on some of your things, because I'm not on labor and I'm not on government and things like that. And so oftentimes our conversation is a little bit more intense on specific issues. And so I just want to maybe perhaps disagree with him. I don't think this is a part-time job. It has been pretty full-time.
It's paid as a part-time job.
I know. We do it pretty much around the clock, it seems like. So great question. I think that is definitely a concern, and we should be looking into that. So, but let's see what else everybody else has for us for questions, please.
So thank you. My name is Diane Rosenberg. I'm with Jefferson County Farmers and Neighbors. My question focuses on health care, specifically how it relates to our agricultural system and water quality. So my question is, when is the state legislature going to take water quality seriously? Our agricultural practices, CAFO and monocropping, leach nitrates and phosphorus into waterways, and too many Iowans drink water that are laced with nitrates. Iowa is ranked second in the nation for cancer. That rate is rising, and nitrates are linked to a variety of cancers as well as birth defects. Yet we had 4 bills that would address water quality and public health that were never assigned to a subcommittee this session. These bills called for a factory farm moratorium, they called for Clean Water Act permits for medium and large CAFOs. They would have required field buffer strips and restored a neighbor's ability to file a nuisance lawsuit based on odor, which has its own health impacts. They were gone. Yet we had 4 agricultural bills that negatively affect water quality or public health move forward. These are Senate File 2371, allowing manure to be removed from a livestock feedlot, even if a nutrient management plan is not approved. Senate Study Bill 3103, which would remove the option to anonymously report a violation, factory farm violation, like manure runoff to the DNR. House Study Bill 696 and Senate File 2370, codifying Executive Order Number 10, which would eliminate the ability to strengthen CAFO regulations, and Senate File 2359 that protect pesticide companies from lawsuits despite health risks. So we have a lot of good bills getting trashed, bad bills getting traction, and a lot of bills focusing on culture wars that just distract from the very real issues facing the state. So my question again is, when is the state legislature going to take water quality and public health seriously and pass protective bills? What's it going to take?
I'll answer it quickly. So I'm not on the Ag Committee or DNR Committee, so the bills you referred to, I haven't looked at. That's part of the funnel, or here's the funnel. So the funnel week was this week, and what happens is any legislator can introduce a bill from the beginning of session in January, and it has to get through, has to be assigned to a committee, then it has to be assigned to a subcommittee, and then it's got to pass through that, which comes back to the committee, and it has to pass out of the committee to remain alive. So at any given time in the first 6 weeks of session, there's probably 2,000 bills floating, floating around that Capitol, and you're lucky to be able to keep on top of the bills that are within your own committee, much as other committees. So if on any question you guys bring up today and we don't have knowledge about it, it's not because we're not interested or we don't care. It's just simply, it's impossible to have insight on 2,000 bills at any given time. So I don't serve on those committees, so I don't know the specifics of the bills you referred to. But to say that we don't take water quality seriously, I do find offense in that. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I researched it last year. I think the state of Iowa last year was $70–80 million on water quality on various issues. I mean, I think the state takes water quality seriously. Maybe not to the level that you think it should be, and that's a different issue. Can there always be more to be done? Sure. But to say we don't take it seriously, I don't disagree with that. What's that?
No, absolutely not.
So I'll tell you, sir, what I did was I sent a text to Mindy and said, please hold the mic in your hand, because if you hold the mic in your hand, people will ask shorter questions, which allows more people to ask questions. Because right now we're 30 minutes into this, we've had 2 questions asked. So if you want to be offended by my cell phone, here's what the exact comment I sent. Mindy, please keep the mic in your hand so they have shorter times to ask their questions. Sorry you were offended by that. I was trying to give everybody more opportunity to ask. Thank you.
I just want to say to your question, since I am on environmental protection and natural resources, that is a very relevant question for me. And unfortunately, I would say we actually have not had any bills coming up to address that have come into committee, okay? And that is the frustrating part. I would also like to challenge us to not only think about quality. You're asking questions about the quality of Iowa water, which has actually seen improvement over the last few decades. It was pretty bad, the 80s, 70s, I don't know, somewhere in there. The nutrient reduction program, some of those things that we've implemented, we've come back. We have come back from some things. Is there room for improvement? Of course there is. There always is. And however, I also want us to think about quantity of water, because we are facing right now a carbon capture pipeline project that's going to have 27, 12, 13, 25 plants that are going to use huge amounts of water. Over 13 permits have been applied through the DNR for very high high amounts of water usage for these carbon pipeline projects. And we all know ethanol uses a lot of water too. We just had in our committee a survey done by you and I on, it was the geological survey, and they were talking a lot about what's underneath of us, what structures, how much water, where it's at in Iowa. They know all that, and they can map all that very much precisely. And we know that ethanol plants were placed based on the need of where the corn is, right? Where the product is. They weren't necessarily placed where there's an excess of water or there's plentiful water. And so as we face a higher demand in just water usage, I think we need to talk about that too. So you have very good concerns. And I don't mean to make it sound like we haven't made improvement or, that we're where we need to be. We certainly, when you guys travel the world and you see other water somewhere else and you can look down, several feet and see crystal clear water, and then you come back to Iowa and you struggle with our muddy rivers. Yeah, that's what you're talking about. That is heartening. That's disheartening. And so, but I do want to acknowledge there's been improvements as the farmers have done. They've moved to a lot of buffers and strips like that. They've done a lot of things. We've talked a lot to NRCS and soil and conservation, and so we have to pull all that conversation together. It's a deep one, okay? It's a big conversation. And so, Jeff, do you want to say anything? And I do want to hear more questions. So, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Diane. I certainly appreciate your advocacy and your organization. Obviously, there's a lot of passionate views on this subject, necessarily because it affects industry, it affects our quality of life. I drink water every day. It affects me very personally. And there's a lot to go into. You brought up a lot of very valid points. Obviously, the cancer diagnosis is on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. I think one friendly piece of advice, though, I think you asked a great question until the very end when you attacked other people's priorities. So I think, in the spirit of treating others the way you want to be treated, is if you want your issues to be taken seriously, it usually helps if you take seriously the issues other people are concerned about as well. So great question, but I would modify that a little bit. I'm as frustrated as much as anyone. I think we really benefit when it comes to subcommittee hearings, mostly just because subcommittees, when legislators are most able to learn about the law. So, I don't serve on agriculture or environmental protection. There's actually another bill that did pass through agriculture relating to, under liability tort law, what they call the duty to warn. I would be interested in that bill. I think that's probably going to be a little bit more pressing that your organization might be interested in. But yeah, it's been a very difficult issue because there's such a big gap. I've taken a lot of votes on this that have been politically costly. For instance, I'm not a friend of the Farm Bureau, according to them, even though I think they're great, and I think there's a lot of great stuff in their policy manual. I have taken votes on this issue. I've sponsored legislation on this issue, and it is what it is. And I wish we could find a better relationship to get everyone around the same table. As far as the CAFO moratorium, I think the market's kind of I think the market's enforcing that right now. I don't think we see a lot of new construction going on. As far as the water quality, I know when we had the swim advisory at Lake McBride, I know that was very unfortunate, and I think is a big red flag that the state needs to be aware of. Dr. Chris Jones, who pioneered the water sensor project, he was at Fairfield Library last year because I take these issues so seriously. I attended that in person and spoke to Dr. Jones. He's much better in person than he is on the internet. Again, this type of thing where try not to attack others, try to give other people the benefit of the doubt. When he was in person, he gave a great presentation, and one of the things he said I completely agree with. He said half the problem could be solved if the USDA was more geared towards human health and nutrition. And that's something that's very near and dear to my heart that I could really pick up and run with. But unfortunately, he goes online, and all he can do is spew venom, call people fascists, et cetera. And that's why he got sacked at the university, because he was doing such a poor job reflecting our state's institutions. So again, an example, a really smart guy, a great doctor, a lot of work under his belt, but unfortunately, because he was taking this very vicious attacking pose, it makes it very difficult to collaborate with. So again, it's not always the issue itself. It's how we as human beings can approach the issue and approach collaboration. So like I said, I'm as frustrated as anyone. I think we could certainly benefit by more discussion. Subcommittees are a lot of work. It is, as I've learned, it is actually asking a lot to get legislators together, to schedule a meeting, to hear from people. But anyway, we can argue whether it's a part-time or a full-time job or not, but yeah, I would like to see more subcommittee hearings in general to explore these issues and get everyone around the table to talk about it. So that's my feedback for now, and I could talk for another 10 minutes, but I won't.
Yes? Okay. Good morning. I'm Dr. Stephanie Mischler, currently the interim superintendent for Fairfield Schools. I know there's a lot of people wanting to talk on the education, so I'll try to keep mine very short. Want to start by thanking you for your service to Southeast Iowa and representing our communities. It's truly appreciated. Also, thank you for your time this morning. I know it's been a very busy week, as you've all spoken to, and lots of plans for today. There's several legislative pieces that we're excited and grateful that are being discussed and moving forward through bills, things like increased teacher pay, adjusting the school start date, and increased funding for preschool, among many others, are things that will directly impact the services that we provide and supporting the success of students. Additionally, I want to commend both the House and the Senate for slowing down the AEA bills and taking the time to engage with stakeholders to hear those concerns and to work collaboratively through the process. There are a couple of continuing concerns that I would frame my questions around today, specifically the most recent iterations of both the House and Senate AEA bills does potentially increase the bureaucracy within the DE and challenges that are posed by the fee-for-service model, particularly for rural districts like Fairfield. Specifically, when I think just back to this last week and how that bureaucracy and moving support further away from our students, from our schools, and from our communities. Our AEA Regional Director, Dr. Jamie Cranston, was in the district at 3 specific events this week, or opportunities this week to support us. She sat at the table in a very comprehensive IEP meeting. She knows the student, she knows the family, she's seen the interactions within the classroom, and a model that moves that support further away in the DE would be problematic. Similarly, in a fee-for-service model here in rural Southeast Iowa, at Fairfield Schools, we don't have the need to support a full-time speech-language pathologist or a full-time audiologist, a full-time challenging behavior and autism specialist. And so in that fee-for-service model, we would really struggle to provide those equitable services, not being able to staff full-time people. My concern would be that the reality would mean we would be building our own consortiums of collaboration between local districts, and that really just recreates what the AEA already does and does really well. So my question for the panel today is, how do you envision supporting the formation of a task force or a study group comprised of representatives from the DE, from the AEAs, from districts, our communities, to continue to collaborate to develop a comprehensive plan that not only addresses reducing overhead and increasing efficiencies, which these bills are largely focused on, but most importantly, how do we continue to work together to build that comprehensive plan that gets at what we're all here to do, which is to support the success of students and close achievement gaps.
I will remind the audience to please hold your applause, to please not shout. We're very limited in time, and they need to leave early, so please just be polite.
So going back to the funnel thing, and we talk about committees, I'm not on the education committee. So because of that, I have zero input. I mean, I can talk to the people who are on the education committee, but I have no direct input on any education legislation that's introduced until it actually gets through the subcommittee, the committee, and then possibly on the Senate floor. So to get into the real details of whatever bill's been introduced or is currently live, it'd be fruitless for me to do that and take time to do that right now. But I have been very adamant from once this got introduced 6 weeks ago, the amount of administrative bloat that's in our AEA system. And that's where my position is on this. It's not so much the services are provided or the test results, and we can argue whether I was worse or better than other states around us. Okay, I look at it from the financial standpoint as a business, because it's a business. It's a $500 million a year business. okay? I take offense when I receive emails that say, don't do anything, let it be. If there's any other state agency that's been around for 50 years, that's not had a serious look at when it was put in place and what it's doing now, if it's doing what we wanted it to do then, do we need to look at what it's different? I mean, 50 years is a big time span. Do we need to rescope? Do we need to look at it? For anybody to tell me that they don't want me to at least look at the question on an agency that has a $500 million budget, if I'm not willing to do that, you got to vote my butt out of the seat right now. I mean, I don't know why it's so, to say don't look at it, let it be, I think is completely irresponsible for the students, for the taxpayers, and for the education system as a whole. But where I come from, again, on the money side of it, this administrative bloat, I mean, people just don't understand the levels. We got 9 different AEAs in the state, okay, 9 different regions. Do we need 9? I don't know. Do we need 7? Do we need 2? I don't know what it is, but that's what part of this is looking at it. But within these 9s, and I think our Great Prairie, Nathan Wood's a good friend of mine. He's a chief administrator at Great Prairie. I think he does a fabulous job. But of Great Prairie, of the 9, Great Prairie I think is 7th lowest on the payroll of the 9. So some of these numbers I'm going to give you, we're not the high end, we're on the low end. These are administrative positions in Great Prairie AEA. 307,000. We've got a regional coordinator for 187,000. HR director, 246,000. School business official, $197,000. A special education director, 236,000. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. There's over 72 people that make over $100,000 in our department, in our regional AEA alone. Okay, I look at that and think, do we need that at 9 different regions? I mean, do we really need to be spending that? And I'm not talking about cutting budget there, but if we put in, I think, more realistic pay packages for some of these people, that's a lot more money to hire more specialists to get in the classrooms that work with the students. Okay, that's my objective, but it's $500 million a year. I think we're very irresponsible if we're not at least willing to look at it and see if there's places that we can improve on it.
So your question was, how are we supporting the formation of a task force, study committee, whichever, yeah, go ahead. Is that what it was? I just want to make sure.
Just continuing to bring people together to not just, and speaking to the reduction of overhead, I would say involving the AEAs in that conversation. Having talked with Nathan Wood just yesterday, that's not something that anybody's saying is not worth looking at, and in agreement with you, Senator Dickey. It's that how do we, again, get all of those voices to the table, and what solutions do the AEAs have to address those concerns before we drastically change a system that our students rely on.
So at the other forum that we've been at in Oskaloosa, one of my key things I wanted to stress there was the fact that that everybody agreed on certain tenets on this. Everybody agreed that there's room for improvement, okay? And because there's room for improvement, there must exist some good solutions for that. You can't come up with those solutions if people don't come together, though, and have that conversation and be willing to look internally and have some constructive criticism, even for themselves and for one another as an agency and as a government agency. And so, and then, of course, the other thing that I thought everybody agreed on was this had to slow down. And it has. However, we don't want it to remain dragging on forever either. And so when people come to me, want to talk about AEAs, I simply just ask for what constructive criticism have you looked at, and what can you offer me for those solutions? Put that in writing, and then I get that to the key people who are the spearhead on this bill. And you should be aware of that. You know, who are the ones that are, because we have 150, right? We got 50 in the Senate, 100 in the House. 150 people don't need to work on the day-to-day specifics of bringing everybody. We can't all be in that conversation. So you funnel that and you get that information to the key people. And in this case, it's always who's floor managing it, who's been assigned that particular bill, and they are going to take it from the start through the subcommittee process, committee, all the way through to the potential passage on the floor and debate. And that person is the expert, truly the one that knows all of the ins and outs and specifics. And so I always funnel that information to them. Here's the solution that was given to me. And talk to them about, okay, who have you been meeting with? And of course, I've been meeting with people. I just saw the Great Prairie AEA chief just, I think that was this week, but it seems like it was a long time ago. He was there Tuesday? Yes, because we had AEA, we had IS. School administrators. We had, they had their Capitol Day, so the building was very, very red. So I just want to point out that there are actually 3 AEA bills. Okay, you have the governor's bill that now has an amendment on it. You have the Senate bill, which is basically the governor's bill that had the amendment with now a second amendment. Would that be a good way to describe it?
No, I think it's very, very, very different than the governor's bill.
Okay, so really a separate bill?
I
Okay.
would say.
Well, the House bill-
It's got her number on it, but it's drastically different. And from what I understand, we had committee, sorry, I don't mean to jump in. We had committee Wednesday night. I think that bill was in committee debated on until 9:30 p.m. I know our workforce didn't get out till after midnight. We debated 12 hours on one bill that day. But I believe they passed around 9:30 that night and said that it passed, and it has a lot of change yet to come forward with it. But because of the funnel, they had to get something out. But I believe it's still quite a bit different than the governor's bill.
Okay, then you have the House bill, which is completely separate. The teacher supplemental salary stuff has been pulled out, and there's just a lot of different things in it. So just be aware that it complicates things for you guys, I feel like, because there's so much moving around. It's so fluid, but that's just the way politics works. It's just the way all bills work. Is they get modified in a lot of ways, and it can happen fairly quickly. So it makes you have to really follow closely along. As soon as the House version was out, I texted it to Nathan Woods, our chief, and said, "What do you think?" And he sent me back his comments. And so what you're asking, how are we supporting the formation of it? Just continuing the conversation. However, I would like to advise that it not drag on forever, because it will be taxing on all of our times. You guys need to get to work. You need to be helping those students. You don't need to be spending time on policy when, if this is going to be about the children, we can be doing it there. So let's get to the solutions, and let's all come to the table and come to a really good place for all of us, is where I'm kind of at on this whole bill. Because it has definitely been taxing in the Capitol. As we always keep saying, it's sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Jeff?
Yeah, I guess we'll just first thank you, Dr. Mishler, for being here and for your leadership in our community during in a very important time for all of us. It's been noticed, so thank you again. This has been a really interesting bill, a great kind of exercise in political science. So I don't criticize the governor often, but she did kind of overstep in terms of kind of taking people by surprise. And traditionally, if you're wanting to make a more broad reform, you would really do a lot of work on the front end to indicate your intentions, bring people around, collect that input, and kind of present a legislative product that maybe had more people's input. So her office has been criticized quite a bit for that, and so I could speak a little bit to the House bill. I believe it's House Study Bill 713, Improving Special Education Outcomes. And basically, the goal is to improve the special education outcomes. I know, there's been some discussion on whether the NAEP metric is the best one to be measuring these. I don't necessarily have an opinion on that. I know there is a lot of interesting discussion on that. But from the governor's perspective, she's very concerned that if these scores continue to lag, that could give the federal government impetus to come in and get involved, which could be a disaster in several ways. So, I do appreciate where the governor's coming from. I think she is addressing a real problem. Again, just figuring out how we can build consensus on this improvement. So the House study bill, it does create a task force looking for areas of improvement. I think the other thing, giving more flexibility to the school districts on how to spend their money. So my understanding is under the status quo, these are appropriations that are more or less forced into the AEA, and I think that's perceived as maybe shielding them from accountability in certain ways. But from the House side of things, it's a much smaller bill. It seeks to ensure that there's no disruption to special education services. It does not terminate any employee of the AEA, and the bill does not prohibit the AEA's ability to perform any of the services they do now. The salary point has been brought up quite a bit. This bill would tie those salaries to commensurate or comparable superintendent salaries, and a few other things here. So it is a big thing. I think the goal is always, and again, I don't think there's ever been a discussion cutting funding. I think the conversation has always been, how do we provide services in the best, most efficient way possible? The feedback that I've heard has been very clear. We need to really shore up and support our frontline educators. Maybe we don't need as many consultants. Maybe we do need more people hands on deck in the school district. And then also, I think the other piece of this puzzle is the Department of Education. So the Iowa Department of Education has had a rough few years, to put it mildly. We do have a new director in place, Director Snow. I think she is off to a good start, but again, she just came on this summer. So doing the work, relationships and trust isn't built overnight. You really do have to invest it. You really have to earn it. And so I'm hopeful moving forward, Director Snow can do the same thing that Director Garcia did in Health and Human Services, and really go out, do meetings with all the 9 regions and more, and really, get people in there, get people around, and just ensure that people are being heard. And no matter what the proposal is, no matter what the outcome is, we're doing it in a manner that includes everyone and prioritizes that input to really build consensus on these topics. So I think that's what we're going to see moving forward. And again, so there's several different versions of the bill. We'll probably still be debating this for the next 6 weeks, I'd imagine. I don't know if there's any resolution anytime soon. So continue to stay involved. And I think Helena's suggestion is great. If you have concrete suggestions, that's usually the best. I think what sometimes is a challenge for legislators is some people will write like a wall of text, and it's not necessarily very, very constructive, and again, sometimes has that kind of attacking tone that makes it difficult to kind of find common ground on. So, if you keep it concise, really clearly state and illustrate your concern, and then if you could further come up with a suggestion or a way to improve it, then I think, the system is set up in a really great way where the people's voice can really be heard, and we can get laws that you guys write. So.
Excuse me, I'd like to add one thing on that. And this is for any issue. I get a couple hundred emails every day. I think most of us probably do up here. That 4-page email is not effective. I mean, it's just, I'm not trying to be rude. I know there's a lot of information. You can't process that and try to respond to those lengthy emails all the time. Try to keep it down to a couple paragraphs. Keep it to the issues, not the emotion. And I know that's hard to do. It's hard for me to do at times. But that's just a suggestion moving forward on any issue that you reach out to us on. And then Helena mentioned floor managers. One thing, we can't be experts on every issue. And I was up front saying, I'm not on education committee. I don't have an education background. I looked at this from a different perspective, and that's more the business side of things. But our floor managers are so important. There's a floor manager on every bill. In the Senate version of this bill is Senator Lynn Evans. Senator Lynn Evans is a retired school superintendent. I mean, I talked to him a great deal about it. He understands the issue. He understands the faults in the proposed bills that were up, and understands still the issues that need addressed. So there is, because we may not have a background in any one thing, water quality, education, whatever it may be, we have people within our caucus that do have those skills, and we rely on them heavily.
Let's thank Adrian Dickey for being here. He needs to get on the road so that he can get to where he needs to be. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here. We'll see you next month, I guess.
I'll also remind the question people, save the story, ask the question.
Hi, thank you for being here. It's too bad you have to leave because this question definitely piggybacks off what you were saying. So, I respect that you need to be somewhere. Historically, if you look at this bill, it was predicated on the fact that the AEA was exclusively developed for special education. It can be refuted by legislative documents that that's not the case. It's a three pillars. We've got special education, We've got ed services and media services. My question is, now that it is past funnel week, we don't expect you to be omniscient, but we do expect you to be getting hard, true answers. So moving forward, where are you going to get information? I know you said from these people, but where are these people going to be getting this information? Further, how are you going to assess the validity of that information? We know that it is not true. It says for special education, if you take away ed services or media services, you are taking away from special education. Within their IEPs, they have to have their devices, they have visuals. The ed services supports general education, which the SDI framework indicates is imperative. So I'm just wondering if, I know Virginia kind of led this path that we're on, but they also just have a bill right now that passed out of committee that creates agencies like we have. So I'm just wondering, where's the information coming from, and how will you assess the validity?
Who are you? Can you tell us your name?
My name is Flannery Beals.
So I'll answer it real quick and then I'll take off. Great question. A lot of that information that you're asking about, where do we get information? It comes from you. It does come in emails often. It comes from conversations. That's where we're saying, for us to look at your issue, more pointed information is helpful. It comes to talking to other colleagues. It comes to talking to Nathan Wood, the chief administrator of the Great Prairie AEA. He's been at the Capitol, I think, 3 different times I've talked with him. I've talked to him at 2 forums on the phone a couple times. He's the head of the AA in this area. He tells me absolutely right, there's issues in this that need addressed. I mean, he said, we have a lot of issues that we need addressed. He's not endorsing any proposal that I know of at this point, but he said, yes, it's a conversation. I don't think I'm stepping out of bounds for him to say there's issues that he's identified that he's tried to address himself within the AAs that's kind of got ignored, okay? That's where I came back to my original statement, was that looking at any department within the state and refusing to look at it, that's wrong on our behalf to do that. Now, I will also say this thing has gotten so, you're this side or you're this side, and that's wrong. Because usually when you get so cemented on an issue on either side, if anything passes to make any changes, you're damned by the other side. And that's unfortunate, but I hope that's not the result. There will probably be something that will get passed this year. And I'm guessing that most of the people won't like it because it's going to be changing what's there, whether it's maybe really good or not in their view. So, thank you.
So, I appreciate the sentiment. I guess I appreciate the sentiment where you're coming from. I guess I still think we might be asking kind of the wrong question. So I would ask you, do you think it's true that there's room for improvement in Iowa's delivery of special education services?
There's room for improvement all over the place, everything. There's room for improvement in the legislature when the governor is creating a bill, a proposal.
Yes or no would have been fine.
I said yes, that's sufficient. But I think that, again, we need to have a dialogue. So I think that there's room for improvement also when the governor creates a proposal and then there are correlating jobs when it's simply a proposal. Do you think that's a problem also?
Yeah, I think the governor was criticized for that pretty soundly by a lot of legislators. Do you think it's true that do you think it's true that there's potential for greater cost savings and greater efficiency in delivering these services?
Am I able to have it? Sure. But I think that it's repulsive that, even that Adrian Dickey said, well, there's bloat, so we have to just go ahead and dismantle.
That's repulsive?
Yes. You can look at administrative pay, but you are taking away. The original bill would harm our students. It wouldn't be detrimental, it would be catastrophic.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, the Iowa House isn't talking about the original bill anymore.
Correct, but it's still, after 2025, you're taking away those ed service and media services. If you look at IEPs, those are written explicitly in there. Also, Lynn Evans indicated that you didn't need to, or IEPs are written differently. The AEAs do not write them, educators write them. So it is concerning that there's so much lack of understanding of education, and we're going to do something that's predicated on because 2 people make too much money.
Again, I would caution you not to flippantly dismiss very real concerns. When we met with Dr. Wood, I think he's a doctor, he admitted very candidly that they had room for improvement, that they had facilities they weren't using, that they had room for greater efficiency and potential waste that could be addressed. So, the administrator of the AEA admitted that pretty easily within 10 minutes of the conversation. So, again, I'm not understanding kind of the hard edge maybe that I would just invite you to take a collaborative tone. And it's okay. I mean, I think you made a lot of good points. We don't have to drag this out any further. But yeah, I would, and I'm sure you've already done this, or I hope you would, certainly direct any feedback you have to the governor's office. They're happy to hear it. And I know the Education Committee has been fielding questions nonstop for 5 weeks. And it's been difficult on them because very few of those members had this on their agenda to work on. So this is something that, has somewhat been presented to the legislator where we have been reacting and learning as much as we can. But again, your initial premise was, you don't know why the AEAs were initially founded, therefore your entire concerns are irrelevant. I don't think that's fair. Yeah, and I just don't think that's relevant to the current discussion. So if you want to focus and pinpoint and make mountains out of molehills, like it's going to be difficult to make progress overall. I don't think if you want to focus on the 1970s, I mean, again, it's just not really relevant to the two main questions that you agreed were true. Again, this whole thing was predicated truth versus false. So as you said, it's true there's room for improvement in special education services, and you said it's true there's potential room for greater efficiency. So therefore, we invite you. And thank you for being here to help us improve that process. And yes, we're going to be reliant on experts like you and other frontline professionals, and hopefully we can find ways to work together because everyone cares about special need kids. If the legislature did something that we left IEPs out or special needs kids suffered, we would probably lose our jobs, and deservedly so. So we're committed to success. We're committed to the children. And these are issues, certainly in the delivery of special needs services. Like I said before, with my work on the Behavioral Health Board, I do have a little bit of insight on how difficult some of these things are and the stress that are on school districts, and we need to find ways to alleviate it. So again, I appreciate your passion. I just think you're maybe focusing on a little bit of the wrong areas that could prevent a more constructive dialogue. I didn't personally indicate that. I just am aware of that concern. I haven't had the chance to properly evaluate. And like I said, I'm not an expert. So what is the best way to measure special education success?
If they're staffed out. We have to look at their individual growth. We have this. We have progress monitoring. We have growth monitoring. We have what we have on Achieve. Look at that. Look at the growth that they are making. Not that they're coming to a school every 2 years, taking these children out and putting them in a room with a proctor that they don't know. School is not something that they feel that confident in, and they need supports, and they just take those kiddos and put them in a room with a proctor. The proctor comes in, says, hey, take this test with me, and then that's it.
That's what's happening now.
That's the NAEP assessment.
Oh, the NAEP test. Okay. So yeah, we need to have and I had the same conversation with the therapeutic classroom grant, is how are we measuring improvement in the system? I think right now the Department of Education was collecting data on like severe classroom disruptions. What other metrics can we start collecting on to measure these things? So, if we want data-driven policy, we need to get a little bit more scientific in collecting these metrics. And I definitely agree that maybe the NAEP, I sympathize that you're correct, that maybe the NAEP isn't the best one, but I don't know. That's a decision for the governor's office. And again, it is a situation, at least from the governor's perspective, where the federal government can be breathing down our neck, and just imagine how uncomfortable that could be. So anyway, I look forward to talking more online or offline or whatever. Obviously, you have a lot of passion and interest and expertise in this topic. So I think the goal is making sure you are connected and staying involved. And again, it's always an ongoing discussion. I mean, all these discussions tend to be evergreen. Education is a perennial issue. It's the largest share of our tax dollars, and it's the area where citizens are most reliant on the state. So yeah, we have a legislative session January through April, but whatever happens this year, these conversations are always ongoing, and we're always looking for ways to improve the system. But again, I think the most drastic thing that I've been facing with is when we do have funding available and people are still not able to fill those special education positions because we have such a dearth in the workforce. So there's a lot of elements contributing to this problem, and obviously I don't think there's going to be any silver bullet solution, but I don't think we need to be afraid of the conversation. And so anyway, like I said, I appreciate everything you have to say, and I think this is great.
I'm an educator. The EAs are our fiercest support system. They support our students, they do everything they need for our students. I just think that it's just extremely rash and rushed, and I think that it's harmful, and I think it's irreparable if we do this. And again, I'm not saying, I have been an advocate. I've emailed both of you. You've received hundreds, if not thousands, so you probably cannot pinpoint, but I've emailed you both more than once, indicating that I would like you to just slow it down. Ask these questions. See if the name is the most important. Because I'm hearing that the governor is calling people in and saying, are you going to support this or not? And I think that's indicative of what Adrian Dickey was saying when he said it's so harmful to be politicized. I have people who will only reach out to Republicans because they know Democrats will support students. Democrats are also saying we can improve this. But it's, I don't know, it's extremely harmful. I am just respectfully requesting you do your due diligence now that it's at a funnel week, because you don't have to be omniscient, but you have to ask for it.
Well, so since you sent that first email, has the process slowed down, true or false? Okay, so there you go.
Okay, let's move on, please.
Good morning. My name's Patrick Bowe-Sold. I'm a longtime Fairfield resident, citizen of the realm. Representative Hayes, thank you very much for the point you made about the impact on our water resources of the ethanol industry. I don't think that's as well understood as it needs to be. So since you're in a position to have something to say about state policy, thank you. I wish Adrian were still here. We have a problem in Iowa that I would really like you all to address soon. The amount of raw animal waste that is being generated by industrial agriculture, specifically by what are called factory farms, confined animal feeding operations, is completely overwhelming the state's water quality. I appreciate what you said about you thought it's getting better. It's not. It's just not. Please take a look at the DNR statistics on this issue. My specific question is, when you've got a problem that big, the very least you can do is stop adding more to it. There's a hog confinement moratorium bill that's been introduced for years on end, and what can you two do to make sure that that gets past the funnels, comes to the floor for a debate, and gets to the governor's desk?
So I missed there's a bill on what again? You said hog confinements? Oh, on CAFOs. Is that what you meant? I bet it's in the Senate. What? Okay, I'm going to write that down. Say it again? 2124. That obviously must be going through ag, on that committee, because yeah, I have not seen it, and I apologize for that. I would have liked to have looked it over. So I can't speak to the bill specifically, and that's one thing I appreciate about the AA. When this one gal, she was very specific in what you said on DE bureaucracy and fee for service. That's what we need to be, because when we look at bills, they are very specific, word for word, and so I can't speak to that. But in general, yes, when we're at the 30,000 foot level and we're looking at our resources, we have a limited amount of natural resources, and we all know that. So again, when we talk about things, even if we're talking about AEAs, it's helpful that we all come together on what things we agree on, okay? And do we have wonderful natural resources in Iowa? Yes, absolutely. Do we want to take care of them? Absolutely. Farmers have every intention. They're going to pass down their land to their children, their grandchildren. I would imagine it is their desire that they would pass down something that's strong and healthy. So always come into first of all, what do we all agree on this? And then identifying those problems and how do we all come to solutions on it. So I think there is a lot of advancement right now in how to deal with large amounts of waste. And I think we're going to be hearing about that in our committee soon. And I can't remember the name of the company, but it's birthed here in Iowa, that our chair said he was going to bring in. And that's the neat thing about these committees, you guys, are usually about 20 legislators, and oftentimes the chairs will bring in different departments. They'll bring in, like I said, the Iowa Geological Society came in, Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited is, like different organizations that have an invested interest in the specific bills that we're talking about in that committee. And so it is our opportunity to gain information. I think oftentimes we make decisions lacking information. Like, so for example, one of the things you said about the foundation of AEAs, that in code, it says 3 things. You said, special ed services, media services. Perhaps, and I don't know this, but I want us all to be careful about communication and that we all really work hard on communicating with one another, okay? And being patient, not only talking, but also listening. So I'm pretty sure, and you can check me on this, but I'm pretty sure when the governor said that, it was perhaps because special ed was the initial code language that was put in, and then on top of that was, so you can find all that out. We have the law library, and we can find out when all that code was added. So it wasn't all added at once? Or you're saying it was all added at once? Okay. That's why I thought, well, maybe that's where some discrepancy is here, but I haven't gone back to look. So yeah, yep, please do. Yep. So your question, what was your question? Moratoriums. Yeah, again, it's always a matter of just gathering. I need to gather more information. Do we asking the questions, asking the hard questions. What is creating a problem, and what is the problem? And those haven't actually come up in our committee so that's the difficult part of this. And so, but there are just so many issues, and yet they're all so important. So I don't really have an answer for you, and I apologize for that. So let's all just continue to keep asking hard questions and keep seeking answers. I know you want to say so much more because you've got all the information for me, I bet. Go ahead and send it to me.
All right, thanks, Patrick. I guess I'll take a stab at this one. This gives me a great opportunity to be politically correct, which can be a challenge sometimes. If you could come up with a list, you've moved here in what, the 1980s? And I know this has been an issue since I think it was a case called Worth County versus Friends of Agriculture, I think in '99, that the Supreme Court decided that set this issue of livestock confinement siting. So, it's been an issue for 22, 23 years. If you could come up with a list of the history of any legislator who served Fairfield that sponsored this legislation, I'd love to review that with you. Because the question is, how do you get a bill passed? So, that I think would be a first step, is just take a look at the history of the legislators in your area who sponsored this legislation over the last 22 years. I think the problem that I see that really prevents progress is when people place partisanship above the issue. The people where I've seen have been successful have always placed the issue above partisanship, if that makes sense, a little bit more of an advanced concept. But I live down the road from a confinement or animal livestock facility. The odor can be a nuisance a couple times a year, although it's a newer facility. I'm told it'll get maybe a little bit worse as the facility ages. water quality is extremely important. I'm never going to deny that. Water is fundamental. It's, the blood of the earth. It's fundamental, and it should always be. I mean, I pray before I drink a glass of water because I want to make sure the water will support me, and it's a spiritual practice I have. So maybe we should be doing that before we go swimming as well. I think the main thing, I try to, again, a lot of this is market driven. So I try to purchase pasture raised. We have a lot of grass-fed cows in Van Buren County, and I want to support local agriculture and local producers. Problem is the USDA is so restricted on the way they process these animals that a lot of the small producers have a hard time, or consumers like me have a hard time getting the products we want from our local locker. Even our local school district had this problem with just the locker space, and because of the USDA regulations, not being able to provide the consumers what they want. So that's just kind of a bottleneck I experience. But as much as I'm concerned about water quality and industrial runoff, I'm also very, very concerned about these synthetic food substitutes that are coming from organizations like the World Economic Forum and the UN, these kind of fake meat type things that are meant to replace. I think one of the big learning things I learned during COVID was how basically livestock and animal husbandry really does represent the strength of a nation. And so it is kind of a blessing that Iowa has enough food that we can export all over the world. That is something we should probably be grateful for. But as far as the environmental collateral there, I'm much more concerned about these synthetic food products, these fake meat, these fake egg products that, like, I'm a dog breeder. I wouldn't even feed this stuff to my dog because they're basically infinite replicating cell lines. So I think people accurately call them kind of tumorigenic. So when I see a fake steak, it absolutely disgusts me. We used the word repulsive before on special. I don't think I would use the word repulsive when it comes to like this fake egg product that probably isn't even shelf stable. So again, there's a lot of concerns there, and I think every individual just kind of has to rank their concerns, and every campaign, we do that. We say, what are the top 20 issues affecting our constituents, and we try to get a position on each one of those and stick to it. So like I said, water quality is a huge concern, but when you look at these kind of fake products that are not very healthy, probably carcinogenic, that are being rolled out to replace animal husbandry, I'm much more upset about that or concerned about that in terms of affecting my quality of life and health and wellness. So that's the best answer I can give you now. Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
My name's Taryn Butel. I'm a school psychologist with Great Prairie AEA, and I work as a challenging behavior and autism specialist serving Fairfield and Mount Pleasant, among other districts. I really had hoped Senator Dickey would still be here because I think he needed to address this too. I want to start by thanking you, and I especially want to thank you as House members because I feel that the House is listening, and I really appreciate. I had time to stand here and get nervous. Now I'll cry. I really appreciate and applaud the House for listening to us. You have slowed things down, and you have, maybe not you two, you're not on the committee, but the House has started to shift things and listen and make more reasonable proposals. One of the things that I'm still really concerned about that I want to ask about, and maybe you don't feel comfortable answering it, but you're here and I'm going to ask you, is that there's been a lot of conversation about the AEA doesn't have any oversight or any accountability, and that's the reasoning for putting us under the DE, under the Department of Education. I'm sorry, I have to remember it's not all ed people here. But first of all, that's not actually accurate. Every 2 years we have an accreditation review by the DE, which all AEAs have passed with flying colors from my understanding. Certainly ours has passed with flying colors. And financial reports are submitted yearly. I don't know the finance end that well. I don't know what all's included in that. But the representation of us as sort of running renegade and having no supervision is just not accurate. Furthermore, the Department of Education is, I want to be politically correct, but I want to be truthful. They don't have a very good reputation for timely response or extensive response. And the proposal to have us now become, I'm not even sure what the right term is, but become their people is really pretty frightening to me. And with a director who is a political appointee and will be forever. I mean, that's how it is, so it won't matter. It's going to flip party to party, which makes all of us in the trenches political pawns, and nobody wants to be a political pawn. the director has no background in public education. She's all about privatization. So what is the rationale for that? Or can we, can we revisit that part of it?
Okay, so the question was about oversight and accountability. But the beautiful thing about, the Department of Ed, the beautiful thing about, this is the difficult in a forum, is that we don't get to have a lot of dialogue. You simply pose a question and you get an answer. But I prefer to have that dialogue, and I would ask you, in this sense, what are you frightened of when it comes to a DE oversight? Because I genuinely want to know what frightens you about that. Can you answer?
She's really trying to get people through. I'm willing to answer it.
Yes, in short words.
Mostly timely response is what frightens me about it, although the politicization of the role of director also really concerns me. One of the really huge benefits I see in the system we have now is that because we have some separation as AEA, we can advocate for kids without fear of repercussion. Either if we were employed by the schools, we would fear losing our jobs because we often have to advocate for things that aren't well received in the schools. Schools are looking to cut money. Schools have other, they have their agendas too. And sometimes in the process of advocating for what's legal and what's right for kids, we meet with resistance. We don't talk about that.
Good.
We just deal with it. So if we've got a director who's got a political agenda, we're subject to that. Timely response is terrible from the DE, and I'm not sure, I don't even think the DE would argue with us, but maybe they would. But they're very slow to respond to needs. And we have things, as Dr. Mishler alluded, I was at one of those meetings this week with her. I appreciated her comments. We have things that have to be timely. Like sometimes we have 2 days notice. We have a student who's getting arrested regularly from school. We need to meet now. We can't wait for DE approval. We can't wait for DE presence. Jamie Cranston is there. She knows the situation. She's able to take care of that. So I'm concerned about those elements.
Okay, so in this conversation, I would ask the DE then how would they respond? I feel like oftentimes I'm functioning as a mediator in this, that I've got two warring sides and this takes conflict resolution. And I would ask the DE then, what would you say to that? What do you say, Governor? What do you say to those that are advocating for this? Because I do not believe that the accountability part was actually one of the proposed reasons why we needed to do this. And so oftentimes when we ask why, what is the purpose of this bill? What does it seek to accomplish? What problem is it solving? I don't know that was really. It was. It was? Okay. All I think of is the administrative bloat and improving scores and for students. Those two things were really put out to me as to why we need to do this. Okay, and that was the reasons that were pitched, and so when you ask those questions, okay, if that's true, oftentimes discerning, is that true or what you're saying behind the reason why, and if so, then how do we accomplish that? So again, a very complex conversation happening here, and I feel like the two people that are at war in this need to come together and talk to one another. So that's what I would ask the DE. How would this oversight and accountability, where would the timely response be in this? Where would the politicization part of this be? Because yes, the DE is an appointed position, and so yeah, I know you're chomping at the bit here. So again, it's this ongoing conversation as we're wrestling with what do we understand? Is it accurate in our perception of what's going to happen? How can we come together on all of this? And guys, I wish I had the answers, but there's so much here. There is so much to understand. And it's challenging. It's challenging. So I just think these two sides, you need to keep coming together. You need to, you've pitched that to me. Now I can go to that floor manager. I can go to my leadership and say, or the Department of Ed would be nice. It is difficult to get a hold of them sometimes. It is. I have tried to get a meeting too, so don't feel like you guys have any specific, you know, it's just you. So anyway, Jeff.
Well, so again, thank you, Taryn, one, for your work for our kids and being that frontline support for the students who need it, and also for attempting to maintain political correctness, very admirable. But on the DE element, I don't think there's anything incorrect about acknowledging the problems there. I think we've heard that feedback loud and clear. That was one of the initial obstacles to the bill, was transferring all these employees to the DE. That's what really was the big roadblock that slowed things down. A lot of people were uncomfortable with that. Thank you for recognizing the approach the Iowa House has taken to this versus the Senate. Similarly, we also did support a higher SSA figure. And yeah, I think we like, so I'm not on education committee, as you mentioned, but I do spend a lot of time. Chairman Wheeler is one of my best friends in the chamber, and we talk about this a lot. And I mean, we were forced to listen. I mean, he went home on the weekend and he was on the phone nonstop, you know, away from his kids and wife, handling these issues. And so we've heard the feedback loud and clear. In terms of objectives, I mean, what I want to see happen, all the bureaucratic rigmarole aside, I think the best outcome that I'd like to see is give people like you a $15,000 a year raise, and we could probably accomplish that by trying to trim up some of the bloat and these other administrative staff, and then try to replicate people like you, train more people in your field, and get those as close to the students as possible, and again, making sure that we're accommodating them and compensating them appropriately to make that happen. So those would be my personal goals. And again, the advocacy is important. If it wasn't for everyone flooding our email inboxes, who knows? Maybe we do just rubber stamp the governor's proposal. So, you know, your input really does matter. And I think we've indicated there are areas where we are listening and hearing that. But as Representative Hayes alluded to, it is a little bit of a push and pull compromise type thing. But on the main point on the Department of Education, I don't think you're hurting anyone's feelings by pointing out just the incompetence or insufficiency there. And I think that's been part of the stress that we've been seeing as an education system overall. It's not just the Department of Ed, it's the State Board of Ed, it's the Board of Education Examiners. And because those issues have been unresolved, it really does create real problem in the lives of students and parents. So that continues to be a priority for the House. And it's something our work on government oversight has done quite a bit on. So again, happy to talk further. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all you do for our students.
I appreciate I'm sorry those of you who are in line for a question. We will be doing this again on April 20th. Please come back. They will be here. They will answer your questions. Thank you to our sponsors. They make this possible. We really appreciate their time today because today's a really busy day for all of them. Email them, call them. They take your calls and they take your emails. I harass them plenty, so feel free to do that. You elected them, or didn't elect them. Anyway, so just let them know. They need to know what's important to you. And also, you get a lot more from honey than you do from vinegar. Be kind. They just remember that they work really hard, and I appreciate them today speaking about how they're not on a committee, because I always forget that when we do this, right? They can't know every 20,000 bills that are there. That's what the committees are for. So please keep reaching out to them. Please keep doing great things. There will be a business after hours at First Resources on February 29th. Now is the time to nominate for the annual awards banquet winners. We want to know who in Fairfield you love and why you love them so we can tell them they're awesome. So please go to our website and nominate for those awards. And if you have not gotten a seat for the awards banquet, please do so, because we will be capping this year so that we can still stay in the building. So it's a great night. It's a great awards night. Thank you for coming. We hope you come back on April 20th. Have a great rest of your Saturday.